The twin suns hung high over Orion Prime Military Academy, casting a golden glow on the massive training grounds where hundreds of cadets from across the galaxy had gathered for the first day of Trials. The air was alive with voices of different species, speaking in dozens of accents, some sharp, some deep, some almost musical. The energy was tense yet full of pride, as every recruit wore the emblem of their homeworld on their uniform. The Academy was the most respected military school in known space, and only the best were allowed to enter. Those who graduated from here became generals, admirals, and heroes whose names echoed across star systems. Among the crowd stood Jax, a tall, lean young man from Earth, his uniform neat and simple, his posture calm, his dark hair slightly ruffled by the morning breeze. Unlike others, he carried no fancy gear, no advanced cybernetics, no flashy weapons. He carried only a small bag slung over his shoulder. The other cadets barely noticed him at first, until a group of alien recruits spotted the Earth emblem on his chest. One of them, a broad-scaled warrior from Draxon with 4 glowing eyes, leaned toward his friend and said in a low voice that still carried far in the open-air, Earth cadets again. I thought the council stopped letting them in. They are slow, fragile, and overrated. The others chuckled. One, a tall, thin insectoid with glassy wings, clicked his mandibles in amusement. I heard they cannot even survive basic training without help from their technology, and yet here they are again, trying to be something they are not. Another joined in, a sleek, feline humanoid with silver fur and piercing yellow eyes. She smirked and added they probably got in because the council feels sorry for them. They're like pets you give medals to for doing tricks, but never real soldiers. The laughter spread through the small group, and a few nearby recruits overheard and snickered. Jax could hear every word, though his face remained calm, his eyes steady. He did not turn to face them, did not argue or defend himself. Instead, he simply adjusted the strap of his bag and stepped forward into the registration line, as if their words were nothing but background noise. But deep inside his mind, something sparked, not anger exactly, but a quiet, iron resolve. He had heard such comments all his life, and each time they became fuel for the fire within him. The Academy courtyard was a massive open space with banners of different worlds fluttering high above. Training drones hovered in formation around the area, projecting holograms of past champions, their victories displayed like trophies for all to see. Alien instructors in dark uniforms patrol the grounds, their faces unreadable as they scanned the new cadets. The air smelled faintly of ozone from the energy shields and weapons nearby. In the distance, the enormous training complex loomed with its towering obstacle courses, combat arenas, and testing chambers. When a loud metallic sound of a horn echoed through the courtyard, all chatter stopped. Every cadet turned to face the central platform, where a tall figure stepped forward, the head instructor commander, a towering reptilian veteran with scarred armor. His voice boomed through the air, amplified by the comm system. Welcome to Orion Prime Military Academy. You are here because you are the best your world have to offer, but only a few of you will remain standing when this training is done. Here we break the weak and forge the strong. Every trial you face will push you beyond your limits. His gaze swept over the crowd, sharp and piercing, as if he could see into the heart of each recruit. For the first phase, you will face a series of trials that measure speed, skill, endurance, and adaptability. No technology, no advanced vision aids, raw ability only. Murmurs ran through the crowd, but Var raised a claw and silenced them. Today, you will witness the first trial, the course of fates, an ancient test designed to break body and mind. Behind him, the ground shifted as massive gates opened, revealing a huge structure made of steel platforms, swinging bridges, and shifting walls. Laser traps flickered in and out along the path. Smoke vents hissed, and heavy machinery clanged in the distance. It looked like a living beast ready to swallow anyone foolish enough to step inside. The commander continued. This trial must be completed in under 15 minutes to pass. There will be no second chances. One mistake, and you fail. The record for the fastest completion belongs to Captain Rain of Vexwrath. At 8 minutes and 20 seconds, no one has ever come close since. An insectoid cadet whispered to another, humans will never pass this, even with their eyes open and weapons ready. It will eat them alive. Blindfolded, they would not even last 30 seconds. Jack stood at the edge of the formation, his face unreadable, but inside his mind was already working. He studied the shifting walls, the pattern of the swinging bridges, the hiss of steam, Vince the rhythm of the traps. Each sound, each movement mapped itself in his head like a silent song. He knew he could run in perfect timing if he trusted his instincts. Commander Ver scanned his datapad and called the first names. Groups of cadets stepped forward, each wearing intense expressions. The crowd watched as the first group entered the course of fates. The alien cadets moved quickly, but one by one they stumbled, tripped, or triggered traps. Metallic arms swung out, knocking them aside. Collapsing bridges sent them tumbling into safety nets below. A few made it far, but none finished within the record time. When they emerged, panting and sweating, the crowd clapped politely, but it was clear the challenge was brutal. As the second group prepared, a voice called out from the sidelines, "Hey, Earth boy, try not to cry. When you fail, it will be embarrassing for your whole planet." Laughter followed the insult, sharp and cruel, but Jack still did not react outwardly. He simply walked toward the preparation area, his boots making a steady rhythm against a metal floor. He reached the starting line, where an assistant waited with a timer and safety gear. The assistant looked at him. "Curiously, you seem calm. Most recruits are shaking by now." Jax tilted his head slightly. "I have been in worse places." The assistant raised an eyebrow. "Worse than this?" He gestured toward the massive, deadly course. Jax answered quietly, without a smile, without sight. The assistant froze for a moment, then glanced toward the commander. "Sir, this cadet says he will run the trial blindfolded." Murmurs erupted in the stands, some mocking, some shocked, others whispering that it was madness. Commander Var narrowed his eyes and stepped closer. "You wish to run the most dangerous trial in this academy without your vision. Why?" Jax met his gaze evenly. "Because they think Earth cadets are a joke. I want them to see how wrong they are." The commander studied him for a long, silent moment, then, without breaking eye contact, pulled a strip of black fabric from his belt. "Tie it yourself, Cadet." Jax took the fabric, tied it around his head, covering his eyes completely. The world around him went dark, but in his mind the image of the course remained sharp. Every sound and vibration a clue, every faint breeze a signal of danger. The crowd grew restless, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others leaning forward in interest. Alien instructors whispered among themselves. One of them, a grizzled veteran from the ice world, Corin, muttered, "If he survives this, he will become a legend. If he fails, he will not even make it to the second day." Jack stood perfectly still at the starting line, listening. The hiss of steam, Vince the heavy thud of machinery, the soft hum of energy, traps, the faint creak of a swinging bridge. Each one was a note in the song of the course, a song only he could hear. The assistant raised the timer, ready to begin. Commander Var's voice cut through the tension. "Cadet Jacks of Earth, begin when ready." A hush fell over the entire courtyard. Every alien eye fixed on the human cadet who had just challenged not only the course of fates, but the entire opinion of Earth's place in the galaxy. The fabric over his eyes fluttered slightly in the warm breeze. His chest rose and fell in slow measured breaths, and then, without warning, he stepped forward into the course's movements, precise, confident, and fearless. The first few obstacles came at him, fast, swinging beams and shifting platforms, but he flowed through them like water, his steps light, his balance perfect. Gasps rose from the crowd. Some could not believe what they were seeing. Here was a human mocked moments ago, now moving as if the course itself bent to his will. As he vanished deeper into the shadows of the trial, the murmurs grew louder, the question hanging in the air for everyone to feel: could he actually do it? The moment Jack stepped into the shadows of the course of fates, the sounds of the courtyard faded behind him, the mocking laughter now replaced by the hiss of steam and the grinding of gears. The air inside was thick with heat and the faint scent of metal and oil. Each step he took echoed on the steel floor, as if the course itself was waiting for him to fail. The blindfold pressed against his eyes, letting in no light, only darkness, yet inside his mind a map of the first section was clear. He had studied it without even needing to see it again. Every sound, every vibration became part of the invisible picture. The first obstacle came almost instantly, a row of swinging beams that moved in uneven patterns, ready to knock down anyone who misjudged the timing. Jack slowed his breathing, counted the hollow clang of the beams against the metal frame. 1, 2, 3. Then he stepped forward, moving between the gaps as the beams whooshed past him close enough for him to feel the rush of air against his face. One wrong step would have sent him flying into the safety net below. But his timing was perfect. A small crowd of alien instructors watched from observation platforms above, murmuring to each other. A Draxon officer folded his arms and said quietly, "I cannot believe this. The boy moves like he has sensors built into his skin." Another replied, "It is impossible without sight unless he trained for years in conditions like this." Jax reached the second obstacle, a moving platform that slid along a rail before stopping suddenly. Then changing direction. The trick was to time the jump before the platform jerked to a stop, throwing the cadet into the wall ahead. Most failed this in their first try, some even on their second. Jax crouched, slightly feeling the faint vibration in the ground. When the platform approached, he could sense the change in the wind, the subtle shift in air pressure. Then, in one smooth motion, he jumped, landing exactly in the center. The platform lurched, but he adjusted without losing balance. The crowd gasped again, some whispering that it had to be luck, others beginning to wonder if luck could explain the way he moved, like each action was planned before it happened. The third obstacle was trickier, narrow beams that rotated slowly above a pool of electrified water. One slip, and a cadet would fall into the water, triggering an automatic fail. Jax listened to the creak of the beams as they turned, the scrape of metal joints, the splash of water from distant vents. He took one step, then another, his arms out for balance, his feet finding the center of each beam as if guided by sight. Up in the stands, a young cadet from the feline race leaned forward, ears twitching. "He is not guessing," she whispered. "He is reading the course." The insectoid beside her clicked in disbelief. "Reading it with what?" By now, Jax was deep into the heart of the course, his heartbeat steady, his breathing slow, the blindfold still tight across his face. Ahead loomed the fourth challenge, the shifting wall, a massive section of steel panels that slid open and closed in unpredictable patterns, crushing anything in their path. It was a nightmare for even the fastest cadets, because one wrong move meant being pinned and disqualified. Jax waited at the edge, listening, the heavy thud of each panel, the grinding whir of the machinery, the faint pause between movements. He took 3 quick steps forward, then sidestepped into a narrow gap. As 2 panels slammed shut behind him, he waited for another opening, then slipped through without touching a single moving wall. The assistant at the starting line was now staring at the timer in disbelief. Jax was not only moving fast, he was moving faster than many sighted cadets who had tried earlier. His pace was smooth, his rhythm unbroken. The fifth obstacle loomed ahead, swinging chains with weighted ends moving in arcs across the path. They were timed to hit anyone trying to run through too quickly. Jax could hear the chains slicing through the air, the faint rattle as they reached the top of their arc. He stepped forward, ducked under the first, swung to the side to avoid the second, then used the momentum of a passing chain to push himself forward past the third. Alien spectators who had once mocked Earth cadets now found themselves leaning closer, not to see him fail, but to see how far he could go. A Draxon recruit muttered to his friend, "This is madness. No human should be able to do this," but his voice no longer carried the same smug certainty. Jax reached a narrow bridge with no railings. The floor beneath it split into jagged openings, showing the safety net far below. The bridge shook slightly with each step, making balance difficult. Jax crouched low, placing one foot in front of the other, carefully listening to the faint creaks that told him where the weak spots were. Halfway across, he froze, sensing a vibration from the other side. Then, without warning, he sprinted the rest of the way, just as part of the bridge collapsed behind him. Commander Var watched from the control station, his reptilian eyes narrowing. "He is not just skilled," he said slowly, "he is controlling his fear." The next section was the rotating cylinder, a massive metal tube that spun continuously with a slick surface. Cadets had to run inside it. Without slipping, Jax stepped into it, feeling the spin beneath his feet, and moved in time with its rotation, each step matching the rhythm so perfectly it seemed like he was walking on a still floor. Within seconds, he reached the other end without a stumble. Finally, he came to the last stretch of the trial, a maze of moving platforms, lasers, and sudden drop sections designed to break the concentration of even the best cadets. Lasers fired in short bursts across the path, moving platforms tilted unexpectedly, and false floors gave way. Without warning, Yet Jax navigated them with the same calm focus as before, sometimes stepping aside, just before a laser passed or leaping at the exact moment a platform tilted. The crowd was now silent, no laughter, no insults, only the sound of his boots striking metal and the hum of machinery. Alien eyes followed every movement, some wide with disbelief, others narrowing in suspicion. A few cadets who had mocked him earlier now stood with clenched jaws, realizing he was proving them wrong with every step. As Jax neared the end, a massive, swinging barrier blocked the final platform. It moved unpredictably, making it almost impossible to time a run. The wind from its swing could throw a cadet off balance. Even without contact, Jax stood still, listening, counting the seconds between each swing. Then he stepped forward at an angle, letting the barrier pass inches from his face before landing on the final platform. The timer beeped, and a massive horn at the end of the course sounded completion. The scoreboard lit up for all to see, time 9 minutes and 3 seconds faster than anyone in the last 3 years. The courtyard erupted in noise, some cheering, some shouting in disbelief. Commander Var stepped forward, his voice cutting through the chaos. Cadet Jax of Earth has passed the course of fate's Blindfolded. The alien cadets who had mocked him earlier avoided his gaze. Some looked away, others stared in silence, unable to process what they had seen. The feline recruit, who had called humans pets, now watched him with narrowed eyes, her tail twitching. Jax removed the blindfold, blinking briefly against the light before tucking it into his pocket. He did not bow or raise his arms in victory. Instead, he simply stepped down from the platform and walked toward the waiting area, his expression calm, as if he had done nothing special at all. But inside, he felt the quiet burn of satisfaction, not from proving them wrong, but from knowing this was only the first trial, and there was much more ahead. Commander Var turned to his officers, his voice low. Keep an eye on this one. The training grounds still echoed with the whispers of Jax's first trial victory. The scoreboard remained lit with his name, as if the academy itself wanted to remind every cadet of what had just happened. Alien recruits from every corner of the galaxy moved about in clusters, speaking in low voices, some disbelief, some curiosity, and some resentment. In the far stands the Draxon warrior, who had mocked him earlier, watched with narrowed eyes, his pride already wounded, yet unwilling to accept that an Earth cadet could be more than luck. The midday heat settled over the academy as Commander Var called the cadets to assemble for the second trial. This time the air was heavier, charged with a different kind of tension. The massive gates at the far end of the grounds rumbled open, revealing a wide domed structure made of black alloy, its surface marked with scorch lines and impact dents from past battles. Inside waited the combat arena, the place where cadets prove their ability to fight, adapt, and survive. Var's voice boomed through the comm system. The combat arena is simple in rules, but brutal in practice. You will face a series of advanced combat drones programmed to adapt to your every move. They will attack with non-lethal force, but make no mistake, their strikes will feel as real as any battlefield. They learn, they counter, they exploit weakness. Your task is to disable all drones before you are marked out of combat. Cadets shifted uneasily, some rolling their shoulders, others stretching their limbs, as if preparing for a fight. Jax stood among them, expression calm, blindfold once again tied over his eyes, his choice made without hesitation. The crowd murmured again, whispering about the madness of facing adaptive drones without sight. The first group entered the arena, the heavy doors sliding shut behind them. A moment later, the sound of rapid movement, blaster training shots, and metallic clashes filled the air. The crowd could watch through the holographic projection above the arena. One by one, the cadets were marked with glowing red bands, signaling their defeat until none remained standing. When the doors opened again, the group walked out, breathing heavily, some nursing bruises. One muttered, "Those drones are too fast. They see every move coming." The alien beside him replied, "Imagine going in blindfolded. You would not last a minute." Var scanned his datapad before calling the next names, until finally his voice rang out. Cadet Jax of Earth, report to the arena. A wave of murmurs rippled through the stands as he stepped forward. The blindfold, already secured, the black fabric fluttered slightly in the warm breeze. He moved with steady, unhurried steps, as if walking toward something familiar rather than a place designed to overwhelm. Inside the arena, the lights dimmed, and the floor panels shifted into different configurations, creating cover obstacles and open spaces. The air smelled faintly of ozone from the drone weapons, and standby mode Jax stood still at the center, listening to the low hum of machinery, the faint whir of drone rotors, the subtle vibration under his boots. A voice from the control room echoed combat start. The first drone launched from the far side of the arena, its metal frame sleek, its sensors glowing faint blue. It moved fast, circling to Jax's left, testing his reaction. Jax turned his head, slightly tracking it by the sound of its engine, then stepped aside just as it lunged, swinging a training baton. The strike passed through empty air. Jax's hand shot out, grabbing the drone's arm joint, twisting and using its own momentum to slam it into the floor. The sensors flickered red, marking it disabled. Gasps erupted in the stands. A few cadets stood in disbelief. The insectoid recruit from earlier clicked in frustration. That was luck. Just wait until the others come. Two more drones entered from opposite sides, moving in perfect coordination. One feinted a low strike, while the other came in high. Jax ducked under the first swing, then spun to the side, avoiding the second. The hum of the drones told him where they were. His foot were precise as he stepped into the blind spot of the first drone, delivering a sharp strike to its main sensor array. It went dark immediately. He rolled backward narrowly, avoiding a downward strike from the second, then used the sound of its landing to pivot and sweep its leg joint. The drone toppled its red sensors, signaling defeat. Above the arena, alien instructors leaned toward each other, speaking quietly. His hearing is beyond normal, one said, or he is trained in conditions far harsher than this. Three more drones dropped from ceiling hatches, landing around him in a triangle formation. They moved in perfect sync, adjusting after every failed strike. Jax waited, listening, measuring the rhythm of their footsteps on the steel floor, the buzz of their servos. Then, in a sudden burst, he stepped forward, dodged to the left, caught one drone's arm, twisted it into the path of another, forcing a collision. The two machines crashed together, sensors flashing red. The third hesitated only for a moment, but in that moment, Jax closed the distance, disabling it with a single strike to its power core. The crowd was no longer mocking or whispering in doubt. Now, they leaned forward, watching every move in silence. Commander Var watched too, his sharp gaze fixed on the human cadet who was breaking every assumption the Academy held. The final wave entered 5 drones, all faster, more aggressive, and programmed with data from his previous fights. They spread out, forcing him into the center, moving in unpredictable patterns. The sound of their engines blending into a confusing mess meant to overwhelm his senses. Jax crouched, low, head tilted slightly, as if listening to something the others could not hear. Then he moved, a blur of motion, dodging between 2 strikes, flipping over a third, landing behind the fourth, his strikes precise and economical, each movement ending with a drone hitting the floor. The last drone came at him with full speed, its metal frame heavier, its strikes faster. Jax sidestepped, letting its momentum carry it forward, then caught its arm, using its weight to throw it over his shoulder. It hit the ground with a loud clang, sensors turning red. The horn sounded, the trial complete. The scoreboard updated. Cadet Jax of Earth, all targets disabled. Fastest completion time in current cycle. The arena doors slid open and Jax walked out, blindfold still in place. His breathing steady. The crowd erupted in mixed noise, cheers from some, stunned silence from others. The Dragzon warrior crossed his arms, scowling, while the feline recruit watched with narrowed eyes, tail flicking slowly. Commander Var stepped forward, facing the cadets. This is the standard you must meet to survive out there. Some of you think strength is in your eyes, or your size, or your technology, but today you see that skill comes from control, focus, and willpower. Jax removed his blindfold, tucking it away, without looking at the crowd, then returned to the waiting area, sitting quietly while the next names were called. But even seated, he could feel the stares, some filled with grudging respect, others with growing hostility. He knew this was only the second step, and the hardest trials were still to come, yet his calm never wavered, for in his mind the path ahead was already clear, and each challenge was just another chance to prove that Earth was no joke at all. The third trial was known among cadets as the breaker, for it tested not only strength or speed, but the will to keep moving when every step felt heavier than the last. In the great hall, the gathered recruits stood and rose the wide screen above, showing a long, twisting corridor filled with shifting walls, moving platforms, and traps that reacted to the presence of a runner. It was called the Gauntlet, and only a few each year finished it without collapsing. Halfway through, Commander Var walked to the center, his voice echoing over the crowd. The Gauntlet is not about brute force. It is about endurance, adaptability, and the ability to stay focused under pressure. The walls will change their shape. The floor will shift under your feet. And if you hesitate, you will be thrown back to the start time, will be recorded, and the fastest finish will stand as the Academy record. The cadets murmured, some shifting uncomfortably, others looking eager to prove themselves. The air inside the hall was thick with tension. The Dragzon warrior stood with arms crossed, his gaze fixed on Jax, as if waiting for a mistake. The feline recruit paced in place, tail flicking faster with each moment. Jax, however, stood still, blindfold already tied, the black cloth smooth over his eyes, his breathing slow and steady, as if the noise around him was miles away. The first few cadets entered the Gauntlet, their images projected above for all to see, walls closed, enforcing them to dodge, rolling under low beams, leaping over sudden gaps in the floor. Some were fast, but tripped on moving platforms. Others were too cautious and got caught in shifting walls, sending them back to the start. Each failure drew a groan or laugh from the crowd. When it was Jax's turn, Commander Var raised a brow. You choose to run the Gauntlet blindfolded. His voice was less questioning and more a quiet acknowledgement. Jax gave a single nod, then stepped forward onto the starting platform. The hum of the machinery filled the air, the floor vibrating under his boots. He could hear the faint shift of walls ahead, the hiss of compressed air from trap mechanisms, the low creak of platforms tilting in place. Begin, the voice announced, and the platform shot forward into the first corridor. Jax took off, running his steps light, yet sure, each sound guiding him through the unseen maze. The first wall slid in from the right, but he had already pivoted, sliding past the narrow gap. The hiss of air told him another trap was ahead, so he dropped into a low roll just as a beam swept across the space where his head had been. The crowd leaned forward, watching in disbelief through the projection above as the blindfolded cadet navigated each obstacle with precision. The feline recruit muttered, "He is listening to the Gauntlet like it is speaking to him." The floor ahead tilted sharply, and Jax adjusted without hesitation, running at an angle to keep his balance. A platform shifted up from below, creating a sudden step. He used it to spring over a spinning bar, landing smoothly on the other side. The walls began to close ahead, narrowing into a moving tunnel. He pressed himself sideways, timing each step with the rhythm of the shifting panels until he emerged into an open section. This part of the Gauntlet was infamous, the bridge of change, a long, narrow walkway with moving tiles that shifted direction or angle at random. Cadets often lost their footing here and fell into the reset zone below, but Jack stood still for a breath, listening, then took his first step. Each tile had a faint mechanical hum. Before moving, he used that to know when a shift is weight. The crowd gasped as he danced across the walkway, never faltering. Midway through the bridge, the Gauntlet changed tactics. Jets of air shot up from hidden vents, tried to push him off balance. He leaned into the force, adjusting his steps. Without breaking rhythm, his arms out for balance. The final tiles shifted upward, creating a small leap to the stable platform. He landed lightly, the roar of the machinery around him sounding almost like applause. The final section loomed ahead, the spiral chamber, a circular room where the floor spun slowly in one direction while the walls moved in another. Spikes extended and retracted at irregular intervals, and the only way out was through a narrow opening that appeared at random points along the wall. Jax entered the chamber, feeling the shift in the floor. Beneath him, the pressure in the air changing each time a spike emerged. He moved along the spinning floor, his head tilted slightly, tracking the sound of the opening. When it came, he sprinted, weaving through the spikes, sliding under one and leaping over another. The crowd held their breath as he dove through the opening just before it closed behind him. The final stretch was a straight run, but the floor panels flipped at random, exposing gaps to drop a runner into the reset zone. Jax timed each step by the faint click before a panel moved. He sprinted across, landing on solid sections until the end platform came in to reach. His final jump carried him over the last gap, landing firmly. As the timer froze above the display, reading fastest completion time. The hall erupted into noise, some cadets cheering, others silent. The Draxon warrior's jaw tightened. The feline recruit narrowed her eyes, but there was no denying what they had seen. Jax had not only finished the gauntlet blindfolded, but had done so faster than any cadet that cycle. Commander Ver stepped forward, his voice cutting through the noise. Cadets, remember, this moment skill is not what you think it is. It is not only what you see, but what you know, what you trust, and what you master under pressure, Jax said. Nothing, simply removed his blindfold and stepped aside, allowing the next name to be called. As the trial continued, he could feel the change in the air around him. Where once there had been open mockery, there was now an uneasy respect, though some looked at him with calculation, not admiration. For every cadet here wanted to be the one at the top, and each record he broke was a challenge to them. All the next trial would come soon, and Jax knew it would not be easier, but that was fine, for he was ready, and each challenge was simply another step toward showing the galaxy that Earth was far from weak. The next morning, the Academy Hall was quieter than usual, yet the air still carried the weight of competition and silent grudges. The cadets gathered around the largest training chamber in the facility, a massive sphere suspended between reinforced pillars, its outer shell of silver alloy gleaming under the bright lights above. This was the zero-gravity arena, a trial designed to strip away every advantage that came from muscle memory, balance, and even sight, for in weightlessness every movement could push a person spinning out of control. Inside the observation deck, Commander Ver stood with his hands behind his back, explaining the rules. Your task is simple: navigate to the beacon at the center of the arena while avoiding the drones. The drones are armed with low-energy shock rounds. They will not harm you, but one hit will send you spinning. If you are hit 3 times, you fail. Each cadet is timed, and the fastest completion stands as the victor. Some cadets smirked. Weightless combat was notoriously difficult, and most relied on eyesight to track drone movement, to dodge, and to grab the floating structures placed in the arena. So when Jax tied the blindfold, again a murmur spread through the gathered crowd, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others leaning forward eager to see him finally fail. The feline recruit flicked her tail in irritation, while the Draxon warrior gave a low chuckle, perhaps expecting this to be the moment Earth pride collapsed. The first cadets entered, and the projection screens displayed their progress. They kicked off walls with too much force, spinning wildly and colliding with floating barriers. They chased after the beacon, but got struck by drones from behind. Laughter rippled from the spectators as cadets tumbled helplessly in the slow turn of zero gravity. Even the best of them looked clumsy in the unfamiliar environment. When Jax's name was called, the room went silent. He floated forward into the airlock, the hatch sealing behind him. The chamber hissed as the artificial gravity disengaged, his boots lifting from the floor with a slow drift. The silence inside the arena was heavy, broken only by the faint hum of drone engines somewhere in the distance and the faint vibration of moving panels. Begin, the voice of the announcer echoed, and Jax did not hesitate. He gave a gentle push from the wall, gliding smoothly through the open space, his head tilted slightly, listening to the subtle changes in air movement that came whenever a drone shifted position. The first drone's hum grew louder from his left. He twisted his body, letting it pass just inches away before it fired the shock round, missing entirely. The crowd murmured in disbelief. Jax's movements were slow and measured, unlike the frantic bursts of speed from the others. He understood that in zero-gravity speed, without control, was useless. His hands brushed along the edges of floating panels, feeling their shape and angle. He used them to redirect himself silently through the maze of structures. The second drone approached from above, its hum sharper, its position betrayed by the slight change in airflow from its stabilizers. Jax tucked his body and rolled under a floating beam, letting the drone overshoot him before using the recoil from a gentle push to propel himself forward. The beacon's faint signal pulsed ahead, and he angled toward it when the third drone appeared from behind, moving fast, its hum rising. Jax grabbed a nearby support pole, twisting himself around it. The drone fired, but the shot passed through empty space. His counter movement sent him drifting exactly toward the beacon's location. The crowd could not look away, the projection showing the blindfolded cadet weaving like water through the arena, never colliding, never spinning out of control. Halfway to the beacon, the arena shifted panels, sliding into new positions. Drones altering patrol routes. A faint hiss in the air signaled the release of micro-debris, tiny obstacles meant to bump into cadets and throw off their aim. But Jax simply adjusted, listening for the faint clink each time a piece of debris struck a panel. He used the rhythm of those sounds to map a new path in his mind. The final section was the hardest. The beacon floated inside a spinning cage of metal bars with only a narrow opening that rotated unpredictably. The drones circled like predators, one coming in low, another high. Jax pressed himself against a floating wall, weighting his ears, tracking the rotation of the cage until the opening aligned with his position. Then in one smooth motion, he pushed forward, twisting through the gap, grabbing the beacon with both hands. Completion time flashed across the screen, a new record faster than any cadet before. The crowd erupted, some cheering, others stunned. In a silence, Commander Var gave a single nod, while the Draxon warrior's expression darkened, and the feline recruit's claws flexed against the railing. As Jax floated in the arena, holding the beacon, he knew the real challenge was not the drones or the spinning cages. It was the growing tension in the eyes of his rivals, because every record he broke, every trial he won blindfolded, was not just proving Earth's worth, it was reshaping the unspoken hierarchy of the Academy, and in a place where pride was everything that could be more dangerous than any test still to come. The training hall had been rearranged overnight, and when the cadets arrived, they found the lights dimmed, the air cold and still, and the floor covered in long shadows that seemed to stretch toward them. As they walked inside, tall black walls rose in every direction, forming a maze that swallowed light and sound. And somewhere deep inside, a low mechanical hum pulsed like a slow heartbeat. The commander's voice echoed from hidden speakers, announcing that today's trial would test not muscle, not speed, but the strength of the mind itself. This was the psychological warfare test, a simulation designed to push cadets into confusion, fear, and doubt. It was not about running the fastest or striking the hardest. It was about staying calm when the mind was attacked with illusions, half-truths, and emotional traps. Each cadet would enter alone and would need to find the exit without succumbing to the mental pressure that would grow stronger with every step. The alien recruits whispered among themselves, some confident, others already unsettled. The Draxon warrior grinned, as if such trials were nothing. The feline recruit flicked her tail, but her ears were alert, scanning for sounds that did not belong. Jax stood quietly, his blindfold ready in his hands the moment he tied it over his eyes. The whispers around him grew sharper. How could he survive a mental trial without sight when the very point of the test was to disorient and overwhelm perception? One by one, cadets entered the maze, and one by one their progress was displayed on the overhead screen. Some moved quickly at first, but soon began to slow, their faces twisting in confusion. Some shouted at things unseen, others froze in place, while the timer ticked on. A few made it out, but most staggered through the exit, pale and shaken. When Jax's turn came, the heavy door closed behind him, and the silence pressed him like weightless water. The hum in the walls grew louder, and with it came faint whispers in languages he did not know, yet somehow understood. They spoke doubts and taunts. They told him he was lost, that the walls were moving, that the exit was gone. He took a step forward, and the floor seemed to tilt, though he knew it did not. He focused on the steady rhythm of his breathing, using each inhale and exhale to anchor his mind. The maze twisted in ways that made no sense, the air warmer in one corner, colder in the next. Faint scents drifted through, one moment sharp metal, the next the sweetness of flowers. But Jax ignored them all, choosing instead to follow the subtle vibrations in the floor. Whenever a wall shifted, it sent a tiny tremor through the structure, and he could map the paths by tracing those tremors with his steps. The voices in the dark changed, growing sharper and more personal now. They spoke in the voices of people from his past, instructors, rivals, even his own family, accusing him of failure, of weakness, of shame. Yet each time he reminded himself these were not real. They were programs crafted to pull him into panic and hesitation. The more he ignored them, the more desperate they became, rising in volume until they became a roar. But the blindfold shielded him from half the assault, and his focus shielded him from the rest. In one section of the maze, the air was filled with the sound of footsteps approaching fast from behind. Jack slowed his breathing, listened, and realized the rhythm was wrong. The echoes were too perfect to even no living opponent would move like that. He turned instead toward the faintest creak of a panel shifting ahead and moved toward it. The sound of footsteps followed him, then multiplied, becoming a crowd, but he pressed on unshaken. The maze threw another trick at him, a sudden warm breeze, carrying the scent of smoke as if fire raged just beyond the next turn. But there was no heat, no crackle of burning. It was another illusion, and he walked through it without flinching. In the next stretch, the hum in the walls vanished, replaced by silence, so complete it made the heartbeat sound in his own ears thunderous. Here the danger was not fear, but disorientation, without sound, without a point of reference. Most cadets froze, but Jack's used the memory of his last 3 turns to guide him, his mind building a simple map that would not betray him. Halfway through the maze, the voices returned in a new form, softer, now almost kind, coaxing him to rest, telling him the trial was done, telling him he had already won and could stop moving. But the subtle echo of their tone betrayed them. Their words did not bounce off the walls the way real speech would. And so he walked on until a faint metallic ringing ahead signaled the final barrier, the exit. It was not a door, but a shifting puzzle of walls that opened only when the correct sequence of panels was touched. The panels emitted tones when pressed, some sharp, some low. Jax ran his fingers over them, lightly listening to the pitch each made. He did not need to see the pattern, only to hear it and match it in sequence. The voices screamed, now trying to drown out the tones, but he lowered his head, letting the sound travel through the bones of his skull instead of his ears, feeling the vibration and matching it to the memory of the tones before. When the last panel clicked into place, the final wall slid aside and bright light spilled over him. The simulation shut down and the maze dissolved into the plain walls of the training hall. Again, the crowd in the observation deck was silent for a moment, then erupted in disbelief. Jax had completed the psychological warfare test faster than anyone else, and without a single visible sign of mental strain. Commander Var did not smile, but his voice carried approval. When he spoke, record broken time log for permanent academy record. The Dragzon warrior's grin had vanished, replaced by a narrow glare, and the feline recruit stared at him, as if trying to solve a puzzle she could not yet understand. Jax simply removed his blindfold and handed it to the attendant before walking off the platform. He knew the trials ahead would be harder, that the resentment in the eyes of his rivals would sharpen into action, but he also knew that each challenge he overcame was building more than a record. It was building a legend, and legends had a way of lasting long after the trials were done. The last day of the competition had come, and the entire academy buzzed with tension. The air in the main hall felt heavy, as if it carried the weight of a storm that was about to break. Banners of every alien world hung from the high walls, their bright colors fluttering in a faint artificial breeze. The final trial was not written on the public boards. It was a mystery left for the cadets to discover only when they stood at the starting platform. Whispers passed through the crowd that it would be the hardest challenge ever placed before recruits. Jax stood quietly at the edge of the platform, blindfold in his hand. His rivals stood near him, each keeping their distance. The Dragzon warrior cracked his neck and rolled his massive shoulders. The feline recruit crouched low, her tail swaying slowly side to side, her sharp eyes watching everything. The commander stepped forward and raised a single clawed hand, calling for silence. His voice boomed over the speakers, explaining that the final trial would be a gauntlet that combined every skill tested so far: strength, speed, strategy, awareness, and mental control, all in one course. The twist was that the course would shift as it was run, walls moving, floors tilting, traps appearing without warning, and every step would be tracked by a swarm of floating drones that projected illusions and launched non-lethal stun blasts to punish mistakes. The objective was to reach the beacon at the far end and activate it within the shortest possible time. Failure meant instant disqualification and the loss of any standing earned in earlier trials. The first runner was a reptilian cadet with scales like black glass. He moved with speed and confidence, but the shifting platforms caught him twice, forcing him into a slower path. The drones swarmed and peppered him with blasts until he stumbled out, breathing hard. The next cadet fared worse, falling into a pit and being pulled out by the safety team. Jax watched each attempt, carefully mapping the shifting patterns of the course. and noting the triggers that caused drones to attack. When his turn came, the crowd leaned forward to watch, some with excitement, some with sharp hope that he might finally fail. He tied the blindfold over his eyes and felt the world narrow to sound, scent, and vibration. He stepped onto the first platform and instantly felt it tilt forward, but he shifted his weight calmly, letting it level again before taking the next step. The air ahead carried the faint buzz of drone wings, and he ducked as one passed over him, firing a stunned shot into empty space. The course shifted constantly, panels sliding open to reveal swinging obstacles, others closing to form narrow tunnels. The sound of metal on metal told him where walls were moving, and the faint scrape of hidden mechanisms gave away when traps would appear. The drones tried to circle him, but he used their own hum to predict their path, stepping aside at the last moment and letting them pass harmlessly. Halfway through the course, the challenges began to layer one on top of another, a spinning bridge above a pit that echoed with mechanical grinding. A wave of hot air from vents below meant to unbalanced runners and drones darting from above in erratic patterns. Jax kept moving in a steady rhythm, never rushing, but never hesitating, his breathing slow, his steps light, his head turning slightly to follow the sounds that mattered, ignoring those designed to distract. The illusions came next, and they were the most dangerous of all. They were crafted to fool every sense, not just sight. He felt the heat of phantom flames, smelled the sharp sting of burning wires, heard the cries of people calling for help somewhere behind him. But he knew these could not be real, for the trial allowed no living beings inside the course. But the temptation to turn back was strong. The illusions even made the ground under his feet feel soft and unstable, yet he trusted the truth of the vibrations through the floor and pressed forward. The commander's voice rang out with updates for the spectators. Jax was ahead of the current record pace, his rivals watched with unreadable faces, though the Draxon's claws dug slightly into the railing as he leaned forward. The feline recruit's tail lashed faster, now betraying her tension. As Jax neared the final section, the course threw everything at him, shifting floors, rapid drone strikes, false walls that slid into place without warning, and even sudden bursts of cold mist that left the floor slick. His boots gripped well enough, but one slip could still mean the end. Yet he adapted, moving with the flow of the hazards, instead of fighting them, letting the shifting floor carry him partway, before leaping to a stable platform and then ducking under a low beam that shot from the wall. The beacon's hum reached him first, a low, steady pulse that cut through the noise of the drones and shifting walls. He moved toward it, but the final trap was unlike any before. The floor ahead dropped away, leaving only a series of thin metal poles, each swaying slightly, and each with a drone hovering just above it, ready to strike. Most cadets would slow here, trying to feel their way across, but Jax took a breath and began to run lightly from pole to pole, letting each sway carry him into the next. His timing so perfect that every drone fired at the space where he had just been. The last pole ended at the platform where the beacon stood, its surface warm under his hand. He pressed the activation panel, and a deep chime rang through the hall. The drones froze in midair, the shifting walls locked in place. The trial was over. The commander's voice announced that Jax had not only completed the course without a single penalty, but had set a new academy record by a margin so wide it might never be broken. The crowd erupted into shouts, cheers, and stunned murmurs. Jax removed his blindfold slowly, the bright light making him blink. He turned toward the others. The Draxon warrior's eyes burned with a mix of anger and respect. The feline recruit gave him a slow nod, one that promised future challenges. But without mockery, the commander stepped forward, handing him a silver emblem, the mark of a cadet whose performance was beyond exceptional. In the days that followed, stories of his blindfolded victories spread beyond the academy through military channels and into civilian networks. Tales grew larger with each telling, some saying he could see without eyes, others claiming he could hear thoughts. But the truth remained simple. He had faced the hardest trials the galaxy could throw at him, and he had won not through luck or tricks, but through disciplined focus and a mind trained to see without sight. Even the rivals who had once called Earth cadets overrated began to speak of him with caution and respect, and while Jax never sought fame, he understood that his victories had given his world something far greater than personal glory. They had given Earth a name that could not be dismissed in the halls of the galaxy, and in the years to come that name would open doors and draw challenges in equal measure for that was the way of legends, and he had now become one.